Welcome to the Living to 100 Club podcast.
Well, hello to all of our listeners joining us today on our podcast. You're listening to one of our successful aging episodes this month on the Living to 100 Club program, and I'm your host, Joe Casciani. On each program, our conversations educate and inspire, helping you get the best out of all the years we're given, regardless of what comes our way. You can learn more about my club at our website. Be sure to take a look at my new training and activities manual, Better, Longer, and Happier, a guide to aging with purpose and positivity. This is a series of 12 modules in a card deck format developed for activities directors at senior living communities. My website is livingto100.club/BLH. Now on to our podcast. On today's program, our guest is Dr. Joel Geiderman. Dr. Geiderman has served as the co-chair of emergency medicine at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles for 30 years. The focus of this podcast, however, centers on Dr. Geiderman's concerns about the ethical, social, and economic consequences of stopping the natural aging process. What happens if people no longer get old? In his new medical thriller, The Plasma Cell Report, our guest has taken up the serious societal dilemmas that are posed if and when the aging process is cured, that is, stopped. If the aging clock starts at some point, what will happen when science learns how to stop it? Will there be competition for life-prolonging treatments? Will we run out of resources to provide for everyone on the planet? Will a policy like death control become necessary to pare down the elderly population? Alarming questions that are explored in our guest's new book of fiction, but questions that must be raised as science flirt with prolonging life indefinitely. First, a little background. Dr. Joel Geiderman has been practicing medicine for more than 40 years. He's been the co-chair of emergency medicine at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles for 30 years. He's a professor at both Cedars-Sinai and the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. Dr. Geiderman was also formerly the vice chair of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., appointed by President George W. Bush. He's authored more than 100 peer-reviewed papers and book chapters. This is his first novel. Dr. Geiderman lives in Beverly Hills with 2 of his 4 children and his dog, affectionately named Reagan. Dr. Geiderman, welcome to our program.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm looking forward to our conversation. I always like to open by asking our guests to tell us briefly about the highlights. You've had a long, distinguished career as a physician. What are some of maybe the points that stand out to you that brought you to where you are today?
Well, that's a difficult question.
Sure.
As you know, my mother was a Holocaust survivor, and she told me I could do anything I wanted to do. Which included writing my book. So I dedicated my book to her. And she was a wonderful lady.
Yeah.
But my career has been great because what we do is we help all people. We have no barriers to helping people in the emergency department. We take care of all comers. And that's made me proud.
Yeah. So you've seen
especially the elderly. We've actually opened a unit for the elderly in our emergency department.
Mm-hmm. Geriatric medicine, ER?
Yes.
Interesting. Sure. So I'm sure you've seen numbers and numbers of people coming into the ER and seeing more older adults. You began to question how are we going to manage, how are we going to continue to provide this care, this medical care for seniors. Did that prompt you to write your book at all?
No, not really. I mean, I think, don't get me wrong, I think keeping people healthy into their hundreds is a great idea. Um, the Bible prescribed 120 years was the right age. And I think that's a good idea. And we all want to live longer, but immortality is a different issue.
Sure. So what got you started on this whole topic, the consequences of a cure for aging?
You know, I came up with the idea that there could be a cure for aging, and I looked into it, and I did a lot of research on it, and I honestly believe that we eventually will be able to quote unquote cure aging.
Sure.
I think that, my tagline in my book is whatever can go forward can go backward.
Yeah.
So if there's some reason that the clock turns on and it makes us all grow older, there's something that can turn back the clock so we won't all grow older. And a certain amount of people die of trauma, infectious diseases, HIV, things like that. But
Mhm.
most of the population will continue to live for a
Sure.
long time.
Sure.
And the question is that a good thing or a bad thing? And that's the um, essence of my book.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I read your book, by the way. I'm not a fan of fiction, but I was engrossed in this book. We can talk more about it in a little bit, but why a book of fiction? Why not, a white paper on the perils of longevity? Not perils of longevity, but
Oh, because I wanted to write a novel.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then, in any good novel, you have to have conflict, resolution. That's always important.
hmm
And then a little sex and a little humor never hurts either.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was a nice touch. Um, how did you come to understand all the inner workings? I don't want to give away the plot entirely, but you had a lot of in-depth knowledge of government and different agencies and what's going on and among all the power players. How did you get all that information?
Well, I acquired it.
Yeah.
There was a book by a man named James Bamford that came out in around 1990 about the National Security Agency, and I read that, and
hmm
I was intrigued by it. And he was actually picked up by them and interviewed by them
Huh.
and interrogated
Uh-huh.
by how he knew so much about it.
Yeah.
But nowadays, with the internet and other things that are available, we know a lot about it. And I have nothing against these agencies. I actually started out being kind of anti-NSA,
hmm
and now I respect them. They keep us safe.
Sure.
Like when you hear things, the term chatter,
Yeah.
you hear there's increased chatter. It's
Yeah.
because the NSA is listening, and they pick up all this chatter.
Yeah.
So I'm not really against them. It's just a plot line.
Uh-huh.
The idea that the president and the NSA had different ideas about this.
Yeah. So you picked up this information, you did your own investigative work and learned about the agencies, and it played out in your storyline. I mean, it's great. So
I did, and also I had some interactions with some presidents. There was the president of my book was sort of um, well, he was not a good person,
uh-huh.
but he wasn't modeled after Joe Biden, who I met and I like.
Uh-huh.
or Ronald Reagan, who I liked. He was
Uh-huh.
modeled after Richard Nixon.
Yeah. Yeah, as I was reading through it, I couldn't quite place who it was that you were referencing, but theoretically Reagan, would you say?
Yeah, I met Reagan a few times.
Yeah.
He was a nice man,
Yeah.
and so was Joe Biden.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
try to be apolitical in my book.
How close are we to turning off the aging clock? What's your sense?
My sense is it could be tomorrow, it could be in 10 years, or it could be in 20 years, but I think it's going to happen. There's something that underlies it. We don't know what it is, but there's something that underlies it.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be. It's a
Mm-hmm.
biological process.
Mm-hmm. If the clock starts, it can be stopped, so to speak.
Yep.
Yeah.
In fact, in my book, I describe the disease called progeria.
Yes.
And there's little kids who get, when they're 1 or 2 years old, their aging clock turns on and they look like they're 90 when they're 10 years old.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
Yeah.
something turns it on. And if something can turn it on, something can turn it off,
Mm-hmm.
I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, that's the premise there. If it can be done, what are the consequences of that? How do we wrestle with untold numbers of people living longer? Um, you touch on that, and when you and I spoke earlier, you also said that there are so many social and economic and all told consequences of having so many people on the planet that we couldn't we couldn't manage all of them, couldn't feed all of them. Is that still the
Right.
concern? Yeah, yeah.
I
So
think that's true. I mean, we're already running out of room we don't have enough homes in the United States
yeah,
or elsewhere.
yeah.
We don't have energy. We don't have enough highways, airport slots, anything. So believe me, I want to live forever, but
Yeah,
you know, it's impossible.
of course. Of course. Yeah, I mean, even if it was possible, there's a heavy toll to pay, right? Yeah. I mean, on
Yeah, and somebody's
society.
got to pay for it.
Yeah, somebody got to pay for it. Yeah. You also mentioned the topic of death control. I never heard that expression. Um, kind of, we've seen that in movies, I think, but what does that connote to you, death control?
Well, the idea would be that you would only get a quota of your life because you couldn't live forever. That the government or some governments might decide that there's only a portion that they can give you, and after that, you would take somebody else to take her place. I don't really know, but I
Hmm.
think that's a possibility.
Hmm. How could that be implemented, do you think? I mean, I remember the movie Soylent Green, but that's kind of a different,
Yeah,
yeah,
that was different.
yeah,
I'm not sure.
not sure.
I'm not sure
Um,
how it would be implemented. I
yeah,
mean, the Nazis had a concept of lives are not worth living. Um,
yeah,
so we don't know.
yeah,
I don't know what mankind's capable of,
sure.
but they're capable of a lot of bad things.
Yeah, if we went down that road before, it's possible we could find a similar road, right? If we had to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. We don't know what's capable, what can be done,
But
especially.
again, just to be clear, it's a novel. I'm not saying that this will happen or what
No.
is what any government will do,
Yeah.
but it's my novel. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
what I created.
Sure. Sure. What about this is sort of related, but maybe peripherally, the whole notion of birth control. If we're kind of on the edge now of managing the population growth and supporting all the human lives. Where does the concept of birth control come in? I know it's very controversial. I've had other guests on the program that, we've touched on this. So what's your view? We're not doing very much in the way of birth control as a kind of way to manage the overgrowth of population.
Well, I think birth control should be a right of people. Um, it shouldn't be mandated by the government or not mandated by the government. I think it's just the human right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in some countries, I think they just can't really support the populations that grow.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, I don't have an opinion about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the point is that the planet can only support a population of so many people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so either people are going to have less children or they're going to die at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't have both
Mm-hmm.
because the planet can't support. We already have what 9 billion people on the planet,
Yeah.
and we're running out of resources.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not trying to be. I am an ethicist. I've written a lot of ethical papers, but I didn't write my book as an ethics
Sure.
document.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And not to belabor the point, but we don't hear very much about efforts to kind of manage the population growth. I don't hear it. You must have come across some of it in your research for the book. We don't hear very much about ways to kind of control the overgrowth of the population. Have you come across
No,
it? No. Yeah.
no, we don't. We don't.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I don't know how to approach that. It's a little bit, but do think that my point in my book was, I think this will happen. I think that eventually we're going to have to confront the idea that people may just be able to live forever.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And use the book of fiction to raise our awareness, raise our consciousness about this. At some point, we're going to have to wrestle with this, if and when we do find some solutions to aging. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
It did. But again, my book was a book of fiction. I wanted to create some tension between the government
Yeah.
agencies and the president.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to the book than just the idea of aging, but that was the premise.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And the tension with the medical community as well, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure if I got their attention or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also need to point out that I published this book when I was 73 years old.
Uh, any thoughts of it being made into a movie?
Yeah, I've had some conversations,
Hmm.
and I'm working on my sequel,
Uh-huh.
and I have a trilogy in mind.
Hmm.
So I think that
Yeah.
that'll happen.
Sure. Well, good. That'd be good. That'd be a good development. If you were asked what solutions would you propose to scientists who want to turn off the aging clock? I mean, if you were asked your opinion, Dr. Geiderman, what do you think we should do about if we continue to study this? Um, what's your opinion on our if we are successful? What do you think?
Well, I don't really have an opinion. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I don't think we can actually stop it. It's like I quoted Robert Oppenheimer in my
Yeah.
book
Yeah.
that, we find things because they're not because they're useful, but because we can find them.
Hmm. Right.
And so I don't know what'll happen.
Hmm.
It but I think it will.
Hmm. So you're pretty neutral. You're staying pretty objective on this whole question. I mean, the possibilities there, but you're not advocating one way or the other.
No, I mean, I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
but I don't know how we would stop it or not stop it.
Sure, sure.
I think, medical science, prolonging aging is a good idea. I mean, I believe in that. I work on that every day. And I think prolonging life is what we aim for in medicine.
Sure.
But immortality is a different subject.
Yeah.
Not only prolonging life, but the quality of life.
The quality of life, of course. And we're learning so much more about how to improve our longevity just by improving our lifestyle, right? Lifestyle changes are making a huge difference.
Exercise.
Yeah.
Social interaction.
Yeah.
All those things. Keeps your brain working.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're making progress. I mean, I've heard this expression, the older you get, the older you get.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I mean, once we get over the major humps, if we do, and we kind of eliminate a lot of the chronic conditions, we can live, 110, 115. I mean, I heard about the person who passed away recently. He was the oldest man in the U.S. His name was Maury Makoff, right? Something like that. And he was worked in odd professions along the way, careers, and he started becoming a sculptor. He started doing sculptures out of scrap metal. And he had his first exhibit at age 100, his first museum exhibit, a gallery exhibit at age 100. I mean, how beautiful is that, right? Yeah.
So my great-grandfather allegedly lived to 113 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And I have an aunt who's a Holocaust survivor who's 101.
Oh, wow. So your mother and your aunt both were survivors. Yeah.
My mother, two sisters, and her brother. Yes.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, congratulations on the book. I think it's a wonderful, document that you put together. What's the takeaway for our listeners? What would you hope they remember from this conversation?
That's a great question. I mean, it's hard to be. I'm obviously want people to live long and happy lives, but the question of living forever is just imponderable.
Yeah.
And that's what happened in my book. There was a tension between the president and the agency over how they would approach it because of what the consequences could be.
Yeah.
But it's almost imponderable.
Yeah. I have a lot of respect for that. We don't have the answers so many times, and we try to force them, and we can't. So I appreciate what you're saying. So your book is The Plasma Cell Report. Where can people buy a copy?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever online books are sold.
Okay. Well, looks like we're. Thanks so much for being a guest, Dr. Geiderman. How can people contact you, or that you have a website?
I do have a website. It's theplasmacellreport.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so people can submit a message on the contact form, and you can.
Yes.
That'd be great. That'd be great. That'd be great. Thanks. Well, looks like we're out of time for today, but before I wrap up, I just want to remind my listeners to visit my website, livingto100.club, sign up for my email list, and download a free copy of my 9 tips to make living longer enjoyable. And if you're affiliated with a senior living setting, be sure to look for my new training manual, Better, Longer, and Happier. Dr. Geiderman, thanks so much for being a guest on our show today. The website is...
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Theplasmacellreport.com is the website, and people can pick up a copy of your book on Amazon and other book dealers. So
yes.
Wishing you much success, and I'll look for the movie if and when it comes out. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. I'll invite you to the opening.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, keep up the good work, and you're doing your medical work at the hospital there at Cedars-Sinai. I'm sure it's a great contribution to our society. So thank you for all you've done.
Thank you very much.
Okay, take care then. Bye.